We're live. I intended to start this show early. I thought I was ahead of schedule. Came into my office to sit down to the studio I'd set up, and it was 10:02. 10:03 even, now that I look at my clock. Now that I'm forced to be fully accountable for how I'm showing up, I look over here, I see 10:03. That's 3 minutes late. That's 50% later than I actually thought I was. I thought I was 2 minutes late, and I'm actually 3 minutes late. That's 50% later. That's very sophisticated because what I'm doing is I'm using math and the brilliance that I have in the realm of math to shame myself. So that's a high level shame loop. That's just something to consider. A high level shame loop. And I'm kind of proud of it. So that's the sophistication of my ego. It finds these cool ways to shame me using all of my brilliance and all of my math. And what a guy. What a guy. I'm going to reach down and I'm going to be off camera for a moment, but I'm going to just get a tea kettle and I'm going to pour tea. I'm still here. Don't worry. Coming back. Feeling a little punchy today because you can hear that sweet, sweet tea sound. That's not why I'm feeling punchy. I'm feeling punchy today because today is the inaugural Victoria Pickleball Festival. This is very exciting. It's put on by a couple of friends of mine, and it is the first festival of its kind in Canada. I'm sure in the States where you guys have complexes of like 50,000 pickleball stadiums, and you've got retirees from all over the world that flock. I know because many people I play with go down to the States for like 6 months of the year and live on these complexes and just play pickleball every day. It sounds amazing. But here in Canada, less so. And today is the first festival of its kind, and it's here in beautiful Victoria, British Columbia. I'm volunteering for it, and I'm very excited to just go and be a goof. And be a good volunteer and all that stuff too. But mostly I'm going to probably tell some jokes and goof around. Had a few people watch the show lately and gotten some really good feedback. Always nice to hear from the fans. Some of what I've heard, one person said, yeah, it's like the show where you go and you drink your tea and then you share how you're feeling. Love it. Thank you for that. Always nice to hear from a fan. And then another person shared with me, hey, I watched some of your stuff, Adam. And one of the things I learned is Adam drinks a lot of tea. So always good to hear from the fans. Appreciate the feedback. Keep it coming. Today, I'm going to mix that up. And so this is risky. When you get the sort of feedback like that, where it's clear something is working, don't mess with it. I'm going to mess with it. I'm going to start today finishing this cup of coffee, and then I'm going to drink my tea. Boom. The coffee is done. All right. And then let's bring this tea here. I learned I wonder if anyone else shares this tendency that I share. I have a tendency to drink a lot of liquid, whatever the liquid happens to be. So, when I was young and very socially awkward and nervous and shy, which I still am, but you maybe wouldn't know that because I'm pretty reliable at pushing myself beyond the threshold of that fear. And then once I get into conversation, I'm super reliable, and it's actually one of my superpowers, being in connection with people. But like most of us, the things that I'm the best at are the things around which I have the most fear because it's the truest expression of my soul and what have you. And so I was very young, very shy. I didn't have fancy language to describe what I was doing, and it wouldn't have made a difference anyhow because the language doesn't really help. You still feel scared. I would go to, in the early days, pre-internet, we had what were called bulletin boards and chat boards where you'd dial in with your ancient modem and it would make a horrible noise, and you'd talk to like 12 other people that also dialed in that were local, that were equally without things to do because we didn't have the internet to entertain us. And so we would do these meets. And what I found at these meets was I was really nervous and I wanted something to do. And so what I would tend to do is I would drink a lot of liquid, like water, root beer, or tea, or coffee, or whatever. Like I just did there. KT, what tea? So that became a self-soothing mechanism for me. And that mechanism persists to today. I have choice over it because I'm cognizant of it. I'm aware of my tendency to do it. It's less automatic than it once was. And it's not necessarily good or bad, but I can discern the times when the way it's showing up is maybe not as constructive or perhaps even destructive for me. So, like, for example, I can drink a lot of alcohol. If you put beers in front of me, or if I go to a party where there's a lot of social interaction, it's going to create a lot of nervousness for me. I can be really reliable to like drink a lot of beer because I learned to drink a lot of liquid. Liquid is self-soothing. And then on top of that, with booze, it reduces your inhibitions, makes social interaction easier. Some people might have an argument about that, but don't worry about that. And so that became the dynamic. And so I do tend to drink a lot of tea or water or whatever. It's very comforting for me. The good part about that is that I'm hyper reliable to be hydrated. You know, there's people who like, they carry their giant jugs of water around because they're like, I'm trying to get enough water in me and I'm not sure. Not a problem for your boy Adam. I'm very reliable to drink all the water I need and more so. But a problem when I'm in social situations where there's alcohol around, I got to be cognizant. I got to be aware that that's like just an easy off ramp. And often the move for me is to not to like try to stop myself drinking, because that's putting my attention on the wrong thing, but instead just turn my focus towards like, oh, there's an edge here that I'm stepping over, and just be alive to that. Hold myself with some tenderness, be in the practice of like, hold on, I'm reaching for something. There might be something worth sitting here with. I was sitting in a ceremony with someone, and one of the things she was sharing with me the next morning, you know, we'd been doing our work throughout the evening. Next morning, we were kind of just hanging out and chatting, and she was sharing, yeah, like one of the things I really got for myself was this idea of like reaching for a thing. And she was sharing part of the wisdom that she received was this idea of like, whenever you're reaching for something, just pay some attention, because when you're reaching for something, there's often something you're trying to alleviate or escape or just get away from. I thought, that's kind of an interesting, like if I'm reaching for a drink, or if I'm reaching for a magic card, or if I'm reaching for a video game or a piece of connection or whatever, just that energy of reaching, it can be there's nothing you need to do with it. It can just be like a moment where you pause and think, I wonder, is there something I'm trying to alleviate or escape in this moment? And you know what's cool? If there is, you don't have to do anything about that either. Most of this work is really about noticing it. And the less we try to do something about it, the better. It's our attempts to do something about the thing that becomes a problem, because then it becomes this, well, whatever. I'm not going to get into that. I'm sorry if you wanted me to. I don't care. I'm not gonna. That. That there is Dana Carvey impersonating George Bush Sr. My impressions are topical. Good stuff. He does the best. He's the best. Dana Carvey. I can't do a very good Trump impression. Doesn't sit in my throat. I don't know. Okay. What we're going to talk about today is this idea of brilliance to avoid having to trust. Fundamentally, to avoid having to trust ourselves. And so this is sort of like classic smartest person in the room. I want to lay out a bit of groundwork. Smartest person in the room. The immediate response that usually gets is, wow, that's an arrogant sounding person. Or do. The second part is, well, if you're the smartest person in the room, get a new room. Bam, I put that person in their place. That's dumb. Here's why that's dumb. The smartest person in the room is a subjective experience that people feel. Not everyone. And lots of people exist in a state of tension where they feel like they're the smartest person in the room, but they hold that that's an arrogant belief, and they are not able to own the fact that they can be arrogant. And so then they're perpetually in resistance to this idea. And so then they're like, these morons, but I can't let myself feel that. And then there's all this, like, it's just a huge cacophony inside their heads, and they're blocked because they can't just start from the place of owning their own arrogance. We're all arrogant. To be human is to have not only the capacity to be arrogant, but the fact that there's going to just be times when you're arrogant. And the irony is that the smartest person in the room often is left in that subjective experience because they can't own the fact that they're arrogant. They're going out of their way to try to pretend that they don't have that. And then as a result, they can't just clean it up or own it or whatever. So the smartest person in the room is someone who has a lot of brilliance and is kind of locked in a bit of a prison because they're actively trying to not feel like they're smarter than other people. I'll just check and make sure. Okay, good. I'm good. A lot of these people have really, really big hearts, really care a great deal, and don't really know how to mitigate their brilliance with the rest of the world. And so they are often in situations like they're like, I have a belief, a thought. I've devoted a lot of conviction and thinking to it, and I've arrived at my conclusion honestly and with a lot of thought. And now this person is bringing me something else, either in a meeting or a situation or whatever. What do? I don't want to just shut them down, but everything they're saying I've already thought about. So now what? And then they're locked in those two situations. And they often, as time goes on, get into this experience. I should say we often. I can often, this person I'm describing is often me, where we're like, I don't know what to do. And I'm not sure how to hold other people because they're bringing me stuff that I've already figured out, but I don't want to just be arrogant and shove them aside. And so then they get locked in this kind of experience of like nodding their head or being polite. If you're on the receiving end of this, it feels like you're being patiently listened to, but not actually received. And so they're like nodding their head and and you're like, no, none of this is making any kind of difference. So these sort of leaders, hyper competent, very, very, very brilliant, put a lot of thought into all of their actions, everything they do, really, really good at separating order from chaos, can make clutch decisions in the moment, can separate their emotionality from the decision, blah, 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 blah. And often if you ask, if you make a statement to these people like, it seems like you don't have a lot of self-trust, they would absolutely argue against that. And the response will be, what we'll say is, not at all. I trust myself immensely. When I began this work as one of these smartest people in the room, as a dude who is very brilliant and understood a lot and thought a lot and did very good in school and like relied on his intellect a lot to sort of get him through things, I would have insisted that I trusted myself. Hold on, there's a sneeze coming. Yes. Excellent sneeze. Nailed that. Got that on mic too. I lean away from mic to sneeze. That's a Tay Zonde reference. That is also very old. I'm going back to the start of the internet in the earliest days of memes. The show where an old unk talks about his oldness. Yo, you gonna tune in on old unk? Anyhow, hold on. Okay. I think we're good. I really want to turn a fan on, but then it's going to be loud and you're going to have to listen to that. So I shan't. I'll just sit here and sweat. So I would insist, I think you're an idiot. I would nod my head politely and then dismiss what you said, because my experience internally was one of deep self-trust. I didn't trust anyone else. I definitely didn't trust you or anyone around me. I certainly didn't have any trust in spirit, God, space blueberry muffin, universe, whatever you want to call that which is greater than our individuality. Spirit is the word I'll use. I didn't have any trust towards that, and I definitely didn't have trust towards other people, but I would tell you that I trusted myself. And this is a really common state that really, really brilliant people find themselves in. So the internal experience is one of, oh, I totally trust myself. And that's part of what makes this so challenging. Because first of all, I think we can agree with the assertion that if you lack a trust in yourself, that's going to be problematic. Secondary to that, if you lack an ability to trust other people, the world around you, that also is going to have some pretty significant limitations. But don't worry, boy, you still got yourself, so you can, make your way. You can be your own made man or woman or pansexual imp. You can get through stuff on your own. But either way, it's going to be problematic. And it's especially problematic if you don't trust yourself, but your internal belief and experience is that you deeply trust yourself. Because now there's a big disconnect between what you believe or think or feel and the reality that you live in. So this is what we want to pull apart today. So when I would tell you that I trusted myself deeply, here is what was actually my state, was that I thought a lot about how different actions and things I would do would play out. I would run a prediction game effectively. So if I make this choice, then that's going to happen. This is going to happen. Then we'll do that. I'll do 4 years in school. That'll get there. I'm pretty sure that, great, I can do that. Or if I do this choice, great, I'll do that. So I would be willing to take decisive action, but it always required a process of kind of playing out the prediction, building a mental model for what was going to happen, playing it all out and being like, got it, I'll get there. So that is not trust. That is predicting and managing the way things turn out, because I know I will land on my feet. I know I will be okay because I've run the path and I've gotten things handled. So that's like what I would call the trap of trust. It looks a lot like trust because it ends up being, I can make decisions. I have figured out how things are going to go. And once I've done that, I trust myself in it. The thing there is no trust required down that path. If everything is played out, if everything is already determined, barring small inconsistencies along the way, but if by and large the main path that you're walking along is figured out, can be derived, there's no trust required. And so the trap that Brilliance tends to create is I trust myself provided I know how it's going to go and I can figure my way out of that ahead of time. And the irony of that is that while that looks and feels internally like trust, like self-trust, it's actually the absence of it. It has this absence of trust in ourselves has a bunch of consequences. It means that we have to figure or be able to figure out every choice beforehand, which is great, provided the life you want it all fits inside of what you can figure out. But there's a caveat there, because the life that you can figure out, life that fits inside what you can figure out, there's a boringness to it because it's already figured out. That's the life you already know. It's sort of like, since you already know that, you can get a little more of it. If you're like, I can figure out how to live modestly and blah, 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 blah. Great. So without having to do anything new, without having to put yourself at risk, you can create a little more of that life. You can push that out bigger, harder, faster, stronger. But there's nothing radically new or different or transformative in that. It's sort of like the caterpillar can figure out how to move along the twig faster by inching quicker. It can do this move a little bit quicker, but it can't fly. That's not a part of what the caterpillar can figure out. That requires a fundamental shift. And so part of the impact of this absence of trust that Brilliance creates for itself is it gets into these people, myself included, we get into this state of needing to figure out everything beforehand. I have to be able to see the path from A to B with almost perfect clarity before I'm willing to commit to it. I might the alternative is I'll dip my foot into the water, but I'm not going to commit. And without commitment, there's not really that much that's going to happen. I'm going to go until I come up against the boundary of like, well, I don't feel safe anymore. I'm going to go back to what I know because there I can trust myself. So this figuring out, it requires a great deal of energy, especially as your life gets more complicated and you try to play bigger games. And that continual need to figure everything out beforehand leads to analysis paralysis. People of this nature, leaders like this, start to get into these states of like, holy mackerel, like I start to go down this path, and then I go down that path, and then I can imagine 5 or 6 different branching things. So now I've got to create those, and it all just becomes incredibly burdensome, and life grinds to a halt. It can lead to this experience of mental constipation, where you're trying to just like share your truth or speak what's there or just make any kind of decision. And instead, you get locked in like, it's like everything grinds, all the gears grind to a halt. It can lead to this state. Hold on, let's have a little tea here to wet the whistle. I might have another sip. That was pretty good. It can lead to this state where instead of actually getting clear or choosing something you want and going for it, you align yourself with other people that have a lot of clarity and are choosing what they want. And it's sort of like, great, I'll go along with them, because that is a way of sidestepping yourself in this process. You kind of choose, I'm willing, they seem clear, I'll go along with them, and that'll get me most of the way there, which is sort of like a half win, because you can hitch your wagon to their thing and go as far as they're going to get you, but it'll never take you to where you truly want to go. And the other side to this is that when you hang out in this state long enough, eventually we often get to a, fuck it, I'm just going to do anything, whatever. I'm just going to choose something. I'm tired of this. This is annoying. And that reaction is born out of I'm tired of trying to figure everything out. I'm just going to do something. It ends up usually being a fairly hasty decision that isn't done from a place of really checking in with ourselves. It's just a place of being exhausted with all the mental gymnastics to avoid having to trust ourselves, which then leads typically to a hasty result, which then reinforces the internal unconscious story. You can't really trust yourself. So, you should have actually thought longer for this. So this is what internal trust looks like for these people. And the irony is this isn't felt like a breach of trust. Here's how it's felt. The internal experience tends to be one of mental exhaustion. It tends to be one of like, not really being able to hand stuff off because other people don't have access to the huge Rube Goldbergian machine that you've crafted in your head to solve for everything, so you don't actually have to deal with any trust. It tends to have an experience of like time being very scarce. Like there's just not enough time. And there's often the experiences like deeply trusting yourself, but at the same time feeling on some level like whilst you can move a bunch of things forward, there's certain areas in your life where there's like paralysis, just feeling kind of stuck, not really sure what's going on. But it doesn't seem to make sense because you can always turn your thinking back towards that. Those areas that feel stuck, the tragedy, you could think of it, is that then we bring more intellect to it. Okay, maybe I feel really stuck here, so maybe I just need to think about this a little bit more, which is moving you further and further away from the thing that would really break this wide open, which is the practice of trust. The thing about trust I found and I continue to find is that ultimately practicing trust sucks. It sucks for a bunch of reasons. The first is that it feels almost like setting aside our greatest tool. If you have used your intellect to navigate the world and to navigate your leadership and to solve most problems in your life, it seems bonkers crazy to set that down. Why would you stop doing that? It's one of your greatest assets. The metaphor I would use here is of a man who's become a master of a hammer. When you've become the world's greatest hammer user, every problem looks like a nail. You look to solve every problem as though it's something that your hammer can resolve. And we could go to that person and be like, well, just think about using something different while they're holding the hammer. It's just not going to work. It's too automatic. They're just going to, I tried to think about it, didn't work. So we actually have to do the inefficient thing in the short term, which is set down our greatest tool, which will feel a little bit like craziness, so as to create something new. So the first thing we have to start doing when we're practicing trust is really setting down, figuring it out, really setting down, knowing the answer. We have to be willing to kind of like plug into something other than what our intellect tells us. I often am quite compelled by the tarot card image of the Fool, which shows this guy walking to a cliff edge, and then there's like a dog grabbing his cloak trying to pull him off, and he's walking right off the cliff edge. And the Fool, as one of my teachers told me, and I've probably shared a few times on this show, the Fool is the archetype of wisdom. The Fool, on some level, understands that the only way to move something from our intellect into the actual state of wisdom is through embodied experience. We have to walk off the cliff edge. The way she put it, my teacher, was that the Fool stands on the rug knowing it's going to be pulled out from under them, because it's the only way to gain wisdom. And so that's part, it actually often feels like being willing to be a fool when leaders start to learn how to trust themselves. And the way this transpires in coaching is really interesting, because these leaders I'm describing enter into relationships with the hope and expectation that the coach or the person leading them is going to give them the answer. Okay, this is happening. What do you think I should do? Is a really common question. Or does this make sense to you? And when we ask someone, does this make sense to you? What we're really asking is, do you agree and think I should do that? We're not asking, did the words I say form a coherent sentence? And if you're working with anyone who's decent, halfway decent at the practice of leadership or coaching, the hard work is to say, I don't know, does it make sense to you? Or to invite them to like, well, I don't know if this is going to be the thing that makes a difference for you. What do you want to try out? So one of the ways we can practice building trust is kind of to create a hypothesis and then test it. Someone says, well, I want to have a deeper sense of trust in my life, specifically in my relationship. Okay, great. So what are you going to practice this week? Well, I don't know, Adam. What's the thing that what should I practice? I don't know. Choose something. And this is the first point where people have to practice, is choosing something. Choosing is hard because they're like, well, but how do I know I'm choosing the right thing? The practice is not choosing the right thing. That's a return to brilliance. The practice is choosing anything and seeing how it goes. What did you learn from what you chose? Okay, well, I chose that I was going to say the word pink bicycle out loud every time I was around my partner and see if that created more intimacy. And it didn't, Adam. Okay, great. So what do you want to practice now? This is actually how we build trust in ourselves, is we take a swing, we look at how it went, we practice setting aside the story, this is a waste of my time, this is stupid, this is dumb. And instead, we're like, okay, got it. Clearly, pink bicycle wasn't the right thing. Let's calibrate then. What might be closer towards what I'm looking for? And as you do that, you learn how to start taking swings, evaluating those swings, and seeing how did that go for myself. And the really cool thing about this practice is that over time, the way trust starts to formulate itself is not, I trust myself, provided I know it's going to go a particular way and I can figure my way out of that ahead of time. Trust becomes, I know that I can make a choice, and no matter where that choice leads me, I will be able to find my way through it. That is a much deeper experience of trust, because that means in that second description of trust, we can alleviate the intellect. We can let it go. I don't have to be able to figure this out. In fact, it's almost essential that I don't figure this out. I just feel called in this direction. Am I willing to lean in? I'm going to lean into it. I'm going to let the choice choose me. The trap here in this part that I'm talking about is that we often hope, oh, cool, I'm creating a breakthrough in trust, so I'm going to lean out over the edge and things are going to work out for me. That's not how trust works. That's the fantasy of trust, that I will do the thing that I want to do, and it's scary, but it's going to work out. Probably not. You're probably going to do the thing that you want to do, that you've devoted your life to avoiding because it's risky. And at first, you're going to run into trouble, and you're going to feel this incredible desire to go back to what you know. And if you're willing to stay the course, You're going to set aside the tools that you know how to use, and you're going to stay committed to the path that you've chosen. And in doing so, you will start to learn how to trust yourself. But we don't get to avoid that first part, that crappiness. I'm going to finish up here by reading a little parable from the book Illusions. I'm just going to read the first part of it. Illusions is an amazing book. It's written by a man named Richard Bach, B-A-C-H. I highly recommend it. It's anytime people ask me, they're like, I would like a book on leadership. And I'm like, great, read this. And you're not going to learn anything. Like, it's not going to teach you about leadership by giving you a set of principles, because you already know those principles. If I asked you, if I was a weird bad guy and I came into your house with a gun and I was like, give me 5 principles on leadership, you could spout 5 principles on leadership. You'd be like, servant leadership. The leader always eats last. You know, stuff like this that's obviously true and yet doesn't seem to be moving the needle for us collectively. Maybe though, if one more person starts calling themselves a leadership coach and posts this on LinkedIn, maybe then the needle will be moved. Okay, here we go. So this is the book you should read, Illusions, Richard Bach. Once there lived a village of creatures along the bottom of a great crystal river. The current of the river swept silently over them all, young and old, rich and poor, good and evil, the current going its own way, knowing only its own crystal self. Each creature, in its own manner, clung to the twigs and rocks of the river bottom, for clinging was their way of life, and resisting the current, what each of them had learned from birth. But one creature said at last, I am tired of clinging. Though I cannot see it with my eyes, I trust that the current knows where it is going. I shall let go and let it take me where it will, for clinging, I shall die of boredom. The other creatures laughed and said, Fool, let go, and that current you worship will throw you, tumbled and smashed across the rocks, and you will die much quicker than boredom. Right? This is the collective wisdom being brought to bear on that one. Don't let go of the twigs. But the one heeded them not, and taking breath, did let go. Here's the important part. Did let go, and at once, immediately, was tumbled and smashed by the current across the rocks. Yet in time, as the creature refused to cling again, the current lifted him free from the bottom, and he was bruised and hurt no more. There's a little bit more. I'll finish this up. It's just 3 more sentences. And the creatures downstream, to whom he was a stranger, cried, Look, a miracle, a creature like ourselves, and yet he flies. See the Messiah, come to save us all. And the one carried in the current said, I am no more Messiah than you. The river delights to lift us free, if only we dare let go. Our true work is this voyage, this adventure, this freedom. But they cried all the more, Savior, all the while continuing to cling to the rocks. And when they looked again, he was gone, and they were left alone, making legends of a Savior. The part I really want to underline there is, he let go, and at once was tumbled and smashed by the current across the rocks. It's an essential part of the process. So the fantasy that, I'm going to practice trusting and I'm going to let go and I'm going to say the thing that I want to say in the room and everyone's going to get up and clap their hands and chair parade me around the room and be like, thank you so much, Adam, for your authenticity. I have nothing but praise for you. It's bullshit. And if that's what happens, good, keep practicing. Because that's not really the fullness of life. The fullness of life includes being tumbled and smashed across the rocks. And the thing the story doesn't tell, because it's a nice parable, is that one in the current will once again be tumbled and smashed across the rocks, and will once again feel the desire to cling the twigs and rocks across the bottom, and will once again have to muster up the courage to let go, and will once again have to be willing to continue letting go once being tumbled and smashed across the rocks until he is once again lifted free. It's a cyclical journey. And so that's how we develop trust, because each time you go through that pattern, you learn a little more, I can actually handle being tumbled and smashed across the rocks. I'm actually okay. I don't need to know where the current goes, because what I'm learning is that I can handle myself. I have what I need to be able to navigate it. Now, I'm going to finish this by telling you that all sounds lovely when you're listening to me, or when we're reading a lovely parable where the wisdom is just right there. I can taste it. It's so sweet. But the truth is, it fucking sucks. You're in the middle of that. And And it's never easy when we're in those moments when we're being tumbled and smashed across the rocks. And it's very natural for us to want to retreat. I have been in that process, in and out of it for like the last six months, and it's challenging. It's not free. And this is why leadership at a elevated level where it's really practiced as a function of being, it's rare because it demands something very particular from us. It demands a degree of courage and practice and willingness to face being tumbled and smashed across the rocks. I'm not talking about like discomfort or effort. That's fine. I'm talking about being tumbled and smashed across the rocks. Like whatever you most fear as far as your failure, I'm talking about being confronted by that. And that requires something that is unique, I think. I think its capacity is in all of us, but my experience is that few people choose it. Lots of us have it chosen for us. You know, cancer takes away our arm, or someone we love, or a tragic accident happens. Those are moments where it's choosing us. And those moments are often very salient and we can choose into them. But then very quickly, life reasserts itself. We don't get supported to integrate that back into our life. And then so as a result, we kind of return back to normality. You know, look at how much more we've reverted in the wake of COVID. So I think it's really valuable to recognize that there's an opportunity for each of us to understand that a lack of trust in ourselves often doesn't occur and isn't experienced like a lack of trust. It can look quite different. And to have a lot of grace for yourself in your process, because sometimes the way your process and your unfolding looks is you have to listen to someone like this guy right here, say the same thing 20 times before you get to the point where you're like, I'm actually ready to take that plunge. And if that's the case, the best thing you can do is love yourself in that and recognize, I can see that the work is to let go of the twigs and the rocks, but I'm not ready to do that. And every time you own it that way, you are doing a rep because you're no longer telling yourself, I think if I cling to the twigs and rocks for like 4 more days, then it'll be different for myself. Instead, you're just like, it's never going to be different, but now is not the time. That's really a beautiful act of grace and clemency towards yourself. And that's actually how this stuff unfolds. That's how leadership becomes a part of who we are. Okay. That is it for the live show today. Coming up this weekend. Can I get like an applause break in here? Will my machine let me do this? Let's see. Oh, I gotta turn that volume up. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Please play me out, band. Boo doo boo da ba bee boo boo doo, and then we'll fade that out. I hope that came through. I don't know if it's actually coming through or not. It comes through in my headphones and it sounds dope. This weekend is the Victoria Pickleball Festival. I'm going to be volunteering at it literally right after this live. I'm going to go down there. It's at Topaz Park. If you live in Victoria or anywhere around, Topaz Park's big park across from Mayfair Mall. I'm going to be hanging out at the raffle booth and around the grounds and volunteering. So come say hi. If you could not care less about pickleball, come anyhow. There's going to be a bunch of food trucks. There's going to be a DJ. It's just going to be a great time. It's going to be a ton of fun energy. And I'll probably be getting up to some kind of hijinks. And you can come and get up to some kind of hijinks with me as well. So if you're around, come check it out. It's going to be an awesome time. I'll be there Friday and Saturday, and we go from Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So make sure you come check out the festival. And if you're not here in Victoria, man, that's a bummer for you because you missed the festival and you missed being in Victoria. But that's okay. That's fine. I still hope you have a good weekend. That's how magnanimous I am. That's the generosity that we're working with here. Okay, any other jokes I want to tell before we finish up? Let me have a sip of tea. I think not. I think that will be the end of the live show. Good day, sir. I hope you guys have a great weekend. Bye-bye.